My name is Ashley Holben, and I'm presenting from Mobility International USA, or MIUSA, where I work on a project called the National Clearinghouse on Disability and Exchange. And we want to talk about this topic of international student orientations because they happen at US institutions all across the country as a way to introduce students to their new host community and host environment. And so we want to make sure that our students with disabilities who are part of those international students communities, are they getting the information that they need to thrive in their new host community and new host environment at the US institution? So we've invited a few different presenters here today. Some of them will talk about international student orientations in the context of higher education, while others will talk about international student orientations at the secondary school level. And speaking of which, I'm really pleased to welcome Jessica Bansen, my colleague at MIUSA, here on this call today. Jessica, can you start by just briefly introducing yourself? And then we'd love for you to just go right into it and dive in as far as what is it, what is it that you do around international student orientations for, and how do you make them, how do you design them specifically with students with disabilities in mind that other international student advisors can maybe take some lessons away from? So I'll hand it over to you, Jessica. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ashley. So my name is Jessica Bansen, and I am a program specialist at MIUSA, and I work specifically with our youth exchange programs. And so at MIUSA, we work with two high school exchange student programs. One is the Future Leaders Exchange, or the FLEX program. The other program for high school age students is the Kennedy Lugar Youth Exchange and Study, or YES program. Both of those high school exchange programs are sponsored by the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, and they're administered by American councils. What MIUSA does is we lead the orientation component for FLEX and YES students with disabilities. We also provide support and technical assistance while those students are in the U.S. If anything comes up or there are some resources and information disability related that's needed. MIUSA also leads a prep workshop for university and college students called the Year of Exchange in America for Russians, or the YEAR program. And MIUSA, in addition to these three main programs that I work with, we also provide orientation to any inbound exchange participants with disabilities, and they could be part of a group or on an individual basis. So as students arrive in the US, or as groups arrive in the US, we lead what we call a preparatory workshop for students with disabilities. So this is in addition to all the program orientations. So this, the MIUSA preparatory workshop does not replace anything, but it adds to the orientation specifically for students with disabilities. So students with disabilities from these three programs come to Eugene, typically at the start of their exchange year. And they're in Eugene, Oregon for a 6-day orientation. And what this preparatory workshop, just with students with disabilities, one of the greatest benefits is that it allows people with disabilities to gain information, skills, and comfort through knowing kind of what lies ahead for their exchange year in the US. In terms of our goals of the prep workshop, what we like to think about is Disability 101. So the idea that it's okay to talk about disabilities in the US. A lot of these students come from countries or places where it's not okay, where hiding your disability is important, and it's a necessity. Students get to learn about their rights in the US as a person with a disability, and they learn about US laws. They also learn key disability-related vocabulary, such as inclusion, accommodations, access, And we get to demonstrate and they get to experience firsthand, what it means when we talk about inclusion or accommodations or access. Another huge benefit of the MIUSA Prep workshop is that students with disabilities get to interact with other students with disabilities. And what that does is it helps normalize disability through open and direct discussion. So our preparatory orientations are cross-disability, students who are visually impaired, students with physical disabilities, students who are hard of hearing or deaf. So just the whole, a whole gamut of disabilities. Many students have never met other students with disabilities. And so by bringing them together, there's a sense of shared experience during their orientation. It gives them the opportunity to share their concerns or worries about their time in the US as a student with a disability. It also gives them the opportunity to ask disability-related questions of peers, of disability specialists, of those of us at MIUSA, and of their other program peers who are attending the orientation workshop. One of the components of our workshop is a focus on disability rights in the US. Students learn a history of disability rights in the US. They learn about important disability laws, Section 504, the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, IDEA, and how those laws impact their time. Specifically that the ADA allows or provides legal support and for students studying in the United States, including international students, so that laws such as the ADA and the IDEA do not just apply to American students, they apply to all students and people in the US. One of the things that we really focus on during the MIUSA Prep orientation is that we are discussing the American perspective on disability rights and acknowledge that it could be different in the countries that they come from. And what we mean by American perspective, that while students are here, they are in charge of getting what they need, getting the supports they need, and that they have the right to refuse assistance, and that it's okay if someone wants to help you and you don't want the help. It's considered perfectly polite and accepted that you will be independent and get what you need. So an example would be, if you have a visual impairment and someone offers to guide you, but you don't want or don't need a guide, being polite and saying thank you, but I've got this, and that is perfectly acceptable while students are in the US. A key component is focusing and really instilling in the students the concept of self-advocacy from a US perspective. The idea that they will need to speak up and ask and let people know. And one of the things we practice and students get to experience while on program is they learn how to get what they need in order to be successful in the US. How to ask for assistance, being polite, initiative, clear, and what and why in terms of assistance. That they have the right to accommodations, but that they need to advocate or ask for accommodations at times.
Oh, can you turn your sound on, Jessica?
Oh, I'm so sorry. For example, teachers will provide accommodations, but students may need to approach teachers. And so one of the things we discuss and demonstrate, how do you approach a teacher if you need extra time or on an assignment or extra time to get in between classes? And the idea from a self-advocacy point of view is that it's not considered special treatment to ask what you to ask for what you need to be successful. We also really focus on accommodations, what is available to students while they're in the US, how to ask for accommodations, as well as some suggestions on specific accommodations that might be useful to them. So what do they need? And the idea that everyone is different, and students that have the same disability, their needs may be different. During their prep workshop, during the 6 days that they're with us in Eugene, we encourage students to start thinking about what accommodations they will need during their time with us, and what would be useful to them that week, and really trying to practice the idea of self-advocacy, asking for what you want and asking for what you need, and asking for accommodations that allow you to fully access activities. We also work with students during that week on getting them to think about longer term accommodations. What will they need to be a great student, to have fun, to be involved in after school activities, sports, extracurricular activities, etc. So really thinking about accommodations in terms of at their host school, maybe with their host family, and who will advocate, who will be an ally and advocate for the accommodations and supports they need. So identifying if you're having difficulty in a class, approaching a teacher, approaching a support person in the office, maybe if you're still having difficulty at school, talking to your host family or your local coordinator. So identifying those people are there to assist with making sure students can get the accommodations and supports that they need. We also spend time talking to students about reasonable accommodations. The idea that they will have access and accommodations to get what they need and to be independent. And reasonable meaning if you needed or would benefit from having, say, access to an iPad, either for screen reading or note taking, whatever it may be, a reasonable accommodation would be for the school district to provide it. Will it be the latest and greatest iPad? Maybe not, but it will be what it will be able to provide you access so that you could be independent. We also give students examples of reasonable accommodations in the US for those students that may benefit from technology, from accommodations such as allowing students to sit in the front of a classroom, extra time on assignments, or time to get between classes, especially if they're attending a larger school. So those are kind of the overview key points and content that we try to cover throughout our 6-day orientation. In terms of activity components while students are there are a number of different activities that we engage with students in or lead students in that help students not only get to experience that firsthand, what it looks like to be a student in the US, to be in maybe a more inclusive and accessible society. One of our workshop activity components is visiting a US high school and with high school age peers so that students have an idea, even though they may not attend that particular high school, but just what to expect in terms of an American high school. You know, looking at lockers and hallways, cafeterias, just getting a real sense of what a high school in the US will look like, and having the opportunity to meet with some high school peers that may attend that high school. Another important activity component during prep is having a dinner with mentors. And these are mentors that are younger and easily relatable with the students, but these mentors have similar disabilities to the students that they have dinner with. And what that provides students with is an opportunity to hear from other students with disabilities about accommodations, adaptations, supports they use to fully participate in classes and extracurricular activities. We have heard over and over and over, including this past summer, how excited some of our workshop attendees were to meet a student who had a very similar disability. For example, a student who was missing part of an arm had never met another person that had a similar disability. And through our mentor activity, they were able to connect with a mentor, a younger mentor, so someone easily relatable, who had the same disability. And the student described it as a dream come true, getting to meet someone, learn from them, and just, so that is definitely one of the highlights for us at MIUSA is facilitating that connection with someone with a similar disability, about of a similar age. One of the other key components of our MIUSA prep orientation is having specialists come and meet with students. And those specialists are familiar with that particular disability. In some cases, they may have a similar disability. For example, we have teachers of the visually impaired come and meet with students, and some of those teachers themselves are blind or low vision, or having a hard of hearing specialist come and meet with students who are deaf or hard of hearing, who may be deaf or hard of hearing themselves. And when they meet with a specialist, students get to ask questions. The specialist learns a little bit more about them and about their particular support needs, and they get to discuss adaptations, supports, accommodations that the students may find useful in classes and extracurricular activities while they're in the US. One of the components weaved throughout the student 6-day orientation is building in cross-disability teamwork activities. Give students an opportunity to practice self-advocacy, experiencing inclusion and collaboration, and really learn firsthand about accommodations. What would be an accommodation someone who maybe was visually impaired would need for full access? What might be an accommodation that someone with a physical disability might need to fully participate in an activity? For example, we went and visited a park that was very accessible and inclusive, and we put students in cross-disability teams and challenged them to identify different things, working as a team to find different things at the park. Braille labels, where the wheelchair swing was, identifying, and it was not only a fun activity, but it really promoted teamwork. It promoted greater understanding and greater awareness. In Eugene, we typically take students to a ropes course where they are challenged individually and challenged as a team. A lot of the workshop activities are very engaging and hands-on. We often group students across disabilities for brainstorming, accommodations or supports or any sort of activity. So it really gets them thinking not only maybe about accommodations that would be helpful for them, but accommodations that would be beneficial for all students with disabilities. One of the components we weave into the MIUSA prep orientation is the idea that community volunteer activities are also inclusive and accessible in the US. For instance, we go and visit a community garden where all students get to complete volunteer activities, regardless of their disability, and they get to work with disabled peers as well as non-disabled. During the MIUSA prep workshop, students get to participate in adaptive activities, which for many of them is a first. For example, we take students out and they get to experience adaptive bicycling. They get to go to a gym that has adaptive equipment and experience what working out in a typical US gym would be like. They also get to try out equipment. So if we have a student with a physical disability, for example, and that student is getting to experience what it's like on a motorized scooter, we encourage all students to try out, riding a motorized scooter, even if, they don't have a physical disability. One of the other things we encourage is for students to try out assistive technology that might be common for someone with a visual impairment. So just really fostering a greater understanding and a greater insight into what is available as a student. So in summary, what we've heard from students through their end of program evaluations, the benefits that they've identified that they've received by attending the MIUSA prep workshops, that they have come away from the orientation with an increased understanding of expectations, what to expect as a student with a disability, and what will be expected of them as a student with a disability. Students also have told us that they feel better prepared for their exchange year. Students leave the MIUSA prep and go straight to their host families and host schools. And we've also heard that from their placement organizations who work with the students when they arrive at their host families and host schools, that students just feel better prepared. They feel like they can advocate for themselves. They have a better understanding of the accommodations available, and about how to speak up and make sure that they get what they need to be successful as an exchange student in the US. So we are very excited. We have been doing the MIUSA prep workshop for over 20 years and continue to learn from the students, and the students continue to learn and benefit from their time with us. And I would strongly encourage, if your program does not have an orientation specifically for students with disabilities, to really consider that. We have seen huge benefits, and the students have really benefited too as they start their exchange year in the US. Okay.
Thank you so much, Jessica. That was fantastic, as I knew it would be. I just love these programs that you work on, and any interaction with the students who participate is always such a highlight. And Jessica, one question I had was, well, you mentioned this kind of at the end, having an orientation specifically for students with disabilities. But I also know that a lot of the non-disabled students on the Flex and Yes program, at least, are getting a little bit of information about disability as well. Can you just speak to that briefly?
So that has been one of, I guess, maybe a highlight during COVID, is that we were able to do a lot of online activities and workshops for students to interact and learn about disability rights and life as a student with a disability, even if they did not have a disability themselves. One of the things that we noticed too, once students have been in the US for a month or two, is even non-disabled students are quite frankly blown away by access and accommodations, by just the way that students in the US and people with disabilities in the US are included and involved in day-to-day things. So that is really a highlight. Typically later on in the year, MIUSA presents in person at what's called CEW week in Washington, DC, and the audience is mainly non-disabled students, but that's actually one of the highlights. One of the things students have said over and over again that they really appreciate is learning more, having seen it in their host communities and in their host families and their host schools.
Thank you for elaborating on that. So I just wanted to mention that because I think a lot of the, U.S. institutions that are hosting these international student orientations, if they're thinking, well, we don't have time to do a supplemental orientation or, you know, do something just for this one or two students. But like, we want to really emphasize that non-disabled students are getting a lot out of this information as well. And they're here, if they're in the US, to learn about US culture in addition to their studies. Learning about US disability culture is also going to be a really important part of their exposure to kind of all the diverse communities that make up the United States. So, well, thank you so much for sharing with us about those programs. One more question briefly, just is there anything that you do with the year students who are college and university students specifically that maybe you don't do with the flex and yes high school students? Is there any kind of additional information that the college students might need?
So yeah, that's a great question. When the high school students meet with the specialist during the orientation, one of the things that comes out of that is a list of recommendations from the specialist in terms of accommodations and supports that this might benefit the student. And that we send on to their placement organizations. The difference with college age students is that because they're adults, they come away from the orientation with the same recommendations, but it's provided to them and we encourage them to be self-advocates. We stay in touch with those students and offer the same technical assistance throughout their year in the US. And we also try and connect the students with names and ways to get in touch with the disability support office on their campus. That way they know where to start, because college, even for American students, that first day can be overwhelming. So they leave the prep workshop with recommendations from a specialist, and the college can always reach out to either MIUSA or the specialist. And with kind of a name and a phone number, we try and facilitate that connection with the disability services even before the program ends. But if nothing else, they know where to get started on campus. So.
That's fantastic. And I think that's really key for, again, like you were saying, making them feel prepared and have some level of expectation, knowing what to expect and what's expected of them. So
I can't emphasize enough too how important it is, because they're coming from other backgrounds and other cultures where disability may not be viewed the same way it is in the US. That has been hugely empowering, just getting when they first arrive, just getting that information or that understanding, and then kind of they're off and running, which is great. So,
well, thank you so much, Jessica. Thanks for the work that you're doing, and really hoping that our listeners can maybe think about how some of those that content and those activities might potentially translate into their existing workshops. So thanks again, Jessica.